to imagine all life as you know it stopping instantaneously and every molecule in your body exploding at the speed of light.
Total protonic reversal.
Protonic reversal.
Protonic Reversal with your host, Conan Neutron. Broadcasting from a secret underground lair in Milwaukee, Wisconsin.
A gigantic middle finger to everything that is rock about music, rock and roll, and corporate power.
The thing is, though, if you don't laugh, you're going to go on a killing spree with sharpened nails.
Confidence of a hero or a fool. I wasn't exactly certain which.
Could not be more professional.
It means something. It means something.
You know, that's my take on it. What's yours?
Protonic Reversal!
That's like a science thing, right?
Indeed it is. It is a science thing. It is a science place. It is a scientific fact that we are all up in your face. It is time once again for the one, the only Protonic Reversal. Welcome to it. Post Japanese tour, first episode back, first episode in a month. I'm already twisting my words. It's going to be a great time, friends. I assure you, I have done this before. For those watching video, I'm assuring you that because I'm wearing a shirt with green on it in front of a green screen. So I'm assuring you that I have done this before, but maybe a little bit rusty. But that's okay because we know how to do it and we know how to get it done. Very excited today for a returning guest. It's been a while. I'm going to introduce him in a little bit. Justin Foley of the Austerity Program. Great news, everybody, that there's a new Austerity Program record. Very excited to get into it with him. I have so many little trials, tribulations, success, triumphs, tidbits for the Conan Neutron The Secret Friends Japanese tour. I'm actually going to just do a special little, bonus episode. I was talked into this by a couple people who listen. I was like, all right, I guess there's a couple people that would want to hear that. So fine, I'll do that. So I will spare you the details here. What I will not spare you from is saying the Conan Neutron The Secret Friends U.S. tour coming up next month, East Coast, Midwest, Mountain West, West Coast. We will hit the South sometime, hopefully in the fall, but coming your way without delay. Way of the Neutron tour. So please pay attention to that. If you're at any of those places and you want to come out and say hi, let me know, and I'll see what I can. I'll see what I can do, kid. I'll see what I can do. But that's not what we're doing right now. We're doing the show. We are doing the podcast, which is known as Conan Neutron's Protonic Reversal. So welcome to that. I'm your host, Conan Neutron. I'm a rock and roll lifer that's been touring and recording for 25 years, most known for the band Conan Neutron and the Secret Friends. Music is a huge part of my life, and I use the format of this very long-running podcast to talk about music with musicians whose work I enjoy and respect, but who may not be household names. This is episode 423. Now, if this is your first time listening to the show, archives of it are available for free. No ads, no sponsors, no kidding. ProtonicReversal.com. However, if you want to support the show and get episodes sooner, $1 a month at patreon.com/ProtonicReversal will achieve that goal. And if you like the show or even just a single episode, please feel free to like, subscribe on your platform of choice, share it around on the internet, even leave a review. Because all that helps people discover the show. It beats back the almighty algorithmic overlords. It's just a darn nice thing to do, really. So tonight, Justin Foley returns. It's been a while. I don't remember, you think I could pull this information up before I do the show, right? But I don't remember how long it's been. I do remember it was a while ago. I want to say pre-pandemic. And what I had him on for was the first installment of the Bible Songs project. And I'm going to look it up so I don't sound like a complete idiot before I put him on. He's hearing me be a complete idiot, but he won't get to respond to it, which is just the way I like it. Episode 134. Wow. In 2019. So pre-pandemic. So that's how long it's been since part one of the promised at least two-part Bible Songs project by Austerity Program. May 1st, 2025, at the time of this recording, 6-7 days from now, finally, not only into the ether, but into your ear holes if you live your life correctly, I would like to please welcome back to the show Mr. Justin Foley. Justin Foley, welcome back, man.
Hello, Conan. Thanks for having me back. Good to see you.
I'm a little aghast that it's been that long. It doesn't seem right, but on one hand, kind of does. You guys move at your own pace, and that may be glacier-like, but that's fine. You get there, right?
Exactly.
You envision this as a multi-part project originally.
Yeah.
Putting yourself on the hook, for what I think there's isn't there a Manor Ashman song about part 1 of which there no part 2 is evidence to be seen or something along those lines. I always think about that when someone puts a part 1 in their project. So was this gestating the whole time? Were you was the plan to kind of just it happens when it happens? Tell me about it.
Yeah, I would say the watch this. The genesis of the project was that we was really kind of came off of I had spent 3 years I think slogging through reading the Bible cover to cover.
Rough read, by the way.
I will say this. If we go back to episode 100 and whatever, you will probably hear me give the same advice. I would not recommend.
Don't do it. It's terrible. It's boring. There's large portions of there's the worst.
A lot of it it's just not a very, very good literature. But that said, somewhere as I was finishing that project, I realized that although there was not a lot in there that sort of resonated with me personally, there were elements of sort of reading it that I was like, this is kind of I could see a reason of fitting this into sort of being a lyrical theme for what the band is sort of doing.
Right.
So I dove into that. So we sort of dove into that as a project, and to the first point that you brought up, it took a while. And I realized that we were at about 6 songs through it, and it felt like it was going to have to keep taking time. And I said to myself, well, we could slog through waiting another year or two to sort of be done with having 10 songs or what have you. Or we could say look, this feels like it's a fertile area. Certainly haven't exhausted kind of the idea and sort of what we could do with this. So why not break it up into sort of 2 parts? And then as soon as that sort of came up as an idea, then it all sorts of interesting ideas came up on it. Think of how are the 2 parts complementary? The packaging of the records sort of feels like a 2-part package. There's all sorts of reasons about why it just seemed like a good idea.
So in a way, it almost cracked the code a little bit of how to do it by the process.
Yeah, I think so. And that way we were not, it had been, I think our previous record, so that record came out in 2019. The previous record had come out in 2014. We weren't looking at 7 years. We were looking at 5 years between records. So, so it just, it felt good.
Well, and it's something where folks that know the band know that, it's, you work on your own timeline always, but it's consistent, and it's gonna. There's probably not going to be any ska songs. It's as of yet. You know what you're going to get into.
Maybe that's part of the value of taking. We never rush into a mistake, right? Any of the mistakes that we have made, we've had plenty of time to sort of consider and then weigh the pros and cons and then go ahead and do them. But the idea of shit, man, it's late at night, tape's rolling, let's put a ska song down.
Why not?
Yeah,
why not? Dance? Yeah.
6 weeks later, you're like, I can't believe we sent that thing to the pressing plant. That has never been a problem for us.
Right, exactly. Well, and there is a meticulousness to all things Austerity Program that
sure.
It appeals to a certain sensibility for sure.
Sure.
And so therefore for fans of the band, there's a certain weight attached to the fact, there's a new record. Oh, fantastic. Great. I will check that out. Like, what's it about? Bible. What did they go Christian? Oh no, this is the most jacked up part of the Bible stories you could ever imagine. Because a lot of the stuff is like, people don't, again, unless you have read the Bible cover to cover, which again, we cannot stress enough, don't do that. It's annoying and it's boring.
If you're like, I'll listen to the first 7 minutes of the podcast type person, you can at least take that with you.
You've been warned. You've been warned. But I mean, there's some stuff that's like straight out like Cormac McCarthy or something that's in there. Like, and it's crazy because if you think about it being, this motley collection of tales told amongst friends and cohorts, and in some cases like narrative parables and things along those lines. It's interesting to look at that from a historical perspective with modern culture, and to be like, oh, this would be like, one of these, investigative discovery shows or something like that on the television. Like now, if this were like, not happening in this apocryphal text from like before, the 2,000 plus years ago. And it's interesting to see that ripped from the context of religiosity and placed forward as a narrative allegory. And I think that's at the long haul, but I mean, I think you guys got there with it. Were there times that you were like, what am I doing? Why am I doing this?
I would say to some degree, yeah. I would want to stress to anybody who cares to hear me say it that the intention of engaging with this as a project has never been that the world really needs to know what two noise rock dudes in New York City in 2020-ish think about the Bible. Like there's no concern that like we think people have been waiting to hear what we have to say about religion, right? That is not the intention of what this is about.
You're not Richard Dawkins, exactly.
Yeah, exactly. There's no political like idea that we're trying to get into. So that's, I just sort of want to clear the way on that.
No, that's important to make that distinction, because I think unfortunately a lot of times when that text is addressed, there is absolutely a political nature to it, and frequently used as a cudgel, especially in this country, right? So it's important to note.
And which is going back to the point that you raised earlier, what's distressing, I think one of the things that frankly motivated me to begin the project, even just sort of reading the thing, is that there is a huge cultural impact that this book has. It is clearly by far and away the largest cultural impact, like text, of anything that we deal with here in America and Western culture. Like it's just, maybe someone can make the argument in the whole world. I'm not going to necessarily go that far, but it's like massively just infiltrates so many things about the world around us. And there's just a lot of it that is, the lessons I was getting out of it were like, these are like, there's just terrible things that are in here. It's not just terrible stories, but it's terrible lessons that we're supposed to learn from these things. And that just bothered me. That bothers me just straight up. But again, I'm just one person. Who cares what I think about that? I think the real value of it that we found, and why it's been an interesting project to engage in, is that and I hope I probably also should have gone back and reviewed what I said on the previous thing, because
you know what, if I was thinking, I would have listened back to it too.
Well, someone may be able who would care to do so may be able to accuse me of this, that you said the same freaking thing you did last time.
I get accused of it all the time, probably because I do it, and it's fine. It's whatever.
But
we learn by repetition, Justin. It's fine.
Maybe about 10 years ago, I realized that there's a consistent theme of the music of the sort of lyrical content in the band, of just people sort of dealing with things beyond their control, right? People being subject to forces beyond their control. And that I think it's just something that, like, for a while, like I was like looking back, I was like, this seems to be something that we just is a theme that we sort of write about. And upon reflection, I realized it's appropriate for the type of music that we make, because I like the idea of, and try and respond to the musical instinct of creating something that is like music that is overwhelming, right? That is just that puts you in a place that sort of takes you out of your moment, takes you out of your sense of self. And that for me, that happens in the most powerful way when it's like big and loud, right? And if you're going to sort of try and capture that feeling in lyrics that sort of are coherent with that, right? I like, my instinct is to sort of be like, tell stories, put a narrative in that addresses sort of that sort of headspace of sort of being, again, being taken out of, being subject to things beyond your control. And then at some point I realized like there's actually a lot of, in the Bible and talking about religion that is, I mean, that's a lot of like the motivation of what people are trying to sort of deal with as they're sort of engaging in this religious storytelling, right? That like, how are we making sense of these things, of this like life of stuff that's sort of beyond our control? And clearly the answer in the Bible is it's about God, it's about the way that God works in the world, etc. And whether or not that's the conclusion I draw, personally for me, it's not. Like that struggle is very appropriate to sort of creating that feeling, which then also goes into like, it's just fun to stand up in front of a room full of people, like with huge drum machine pounding behind you and screaming at them that they're all going to hell. Like it's just as an experience, it's fun, right. It's satisfying. It doesn't like, Conan, this as well as I do. You perform when you're in front of folks, and it's, while on one hand it is there's something artificial about it. On the other hand, the act of doing it is a choice, and how you do it is a choice, and like, so you can engage in that however you want. And if anybody has the chance to stand up in front of people and play the psychotic preacher for a little bit, you will find it satisfying. It's just a fun thing to do, right? So. Like those different strains, I think, come together to sort of make it seem like there's a lot to sort of that we can sort of work with here, and why it felt like it was a worthwhile project.
Well, I think you hit on something interesting too, and that's something that's rarely touched upon in religiosity, especially in the Christian ethos. I mean, they talk about the preacher with the gun in his hand, right? Is probably the closest you get to that of just like what the motivation of the person that is telling these just horrific, scare you senseless stories. To like, ostensibly to scare you into submission to like a higher power. Now, whether that higher power is like, legitimate or, a thinly veiled motivation to acquiesce power itself and money, that's obviously a discussion we're not going to necessarily have to dive into right here. But there's a simple sort of math equation to it that transcends time. Right, it isn't even like tied to like current, like our current epoch. It's like it's something that's been happening for like forever, and there is something that there's a grandiosity to it when it's coming from, again, one of the most popular books in the world, right? Like as far as I know, like Dan Brown hasn't eclipsed the Bible yet, so it can be fraught, but it also it's interesting. It's interesting how little it's actually broken down without the political nature of it. To me, anyway, I should say. As someone that grew up irreligious, I studied all religions sort of like with the same level of kind of interest and like confusion.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, sure.
and therefore maybe have a different background than someone that grew up in like a strict, Catholic upbringing or strict Protestant upbringing or whatever, or Methodist or whatever it should happen to be. But I think that it's fascinating that more artists haven't minded for that style of inspiration, because it feels like there's a lot of it. And I think it's cool to hear it through your focus, like your beat, if you will, if you were like a reporter, right? Of like, oh yeah, it sounds like Austerity Program. It's doing all the things that, again, people like in situations that are out of control, you mentioned, it's all over beyond calculation. It's all over, like a crazy, great example, the Bugs the Bunny song, right? That's like, what is that of like, wow, that's actually an actual hell if you're the cartoon character, yeah. So what is that if not, being the playthings of God, and like the Old Testament, like bastard God too, a lot where it's just like, oh, I just feel like, screwing with this guy today.
Oh yeah.
Wow, really? Like just because you can? Wow. All right. And again, that goes back to like to me the Cormac McCarthy of it all. I was like, no, this is real dark. This is not like your God is love New Testament. Like whatever people get out of that ain't this.
Yeah, and I mean, like, to be like honest about it, the selection of sort of passages that we've come up with is clearly very is deliberate. I'm sure if you know for somebody who's found a lot of like solace and meaning in engaging with the Bible and their religion, or in terms of how they're reading it, they might feel like we're being, if they were to sort of read this whole project as being critical of religion, which again is not the intention, but if someone was sort of be like, look, man, you got 12 songs, you out of a however 1,000-page book, right? You picked the 12 worst passages. Like there's things about loving your neighbor.
Right.
There's pages and pages of genealogy. Like, but you you got to go for the story about the guy who kills his concubine. Oh, like how fair is that? And it's like, if this whole thing was supposed to be a holding religion up for the evil and awfulness that it is, which again, it's not, but like if it was, like that would be a potentially fair criticism. Someone could say you're cherry picking the worst shit just to sort of put your own self in it. And what I'm saying is, yes, we are cherry picking the worst shit, but only it's not because we're trying to like make a grand statement. It's because it resonates well with the intention of the emotion that I think that the music that I like to evoke. Right.
The emotionality of what the band has crafted again and again, record after record over the years. And I think that it hits that way too. And there is, because there is that framework that like, it's almost like you might sell some records if people start protesting it. Right. Like, cause that's a whole thing in and of itself too, which is the outrage market. Oh, you gotta corner that outrage market. Got to say something salacious to get them worked up.
I'm sure somebody has figured that. Like that is like, and it's a good thing that's never been anything we've tried to do, because we wouldn't be very good at it anyway. Trying to crack the code to like what's
not really your beat. Yeah.
Yeah. Exactly.
Well, but I think that's. But it's, and you mentioned one of my biggest problems with reading the Bible cover to cover, which is literally the entire swath of sections. This one begat that one, who begat this one, who begat. I'm like, this is mind numbing. This is like reading like the encyclopedia or something. At least then you feel like you're getting somewhere. At least you might learn a new word or two. But they're all, again, they're all. I feel like there's a narrative thread to it, and I feel like it works. That you could almost have done it and not said, Bible songs. It would just been like, Austerity Program, like, more people in out of control and perilous situations. Part 5, and people wouldn't necessarily have gotten it, and they'd be like, wow, why did he specifically say that's weird? Huh. All right, like you have to get people that are lyrics guys, to like listen a little closely to get it. But I think it's an interesting aesthetic decision that when you did the first volume, I was a little confused. I'm like, what, really?
Sure.
But then, like all things Austerity Program, there was an attendant text if one chose to delve into that would tell you more about it in a wry and informative way, which is great. And then I was like, oh no, I got it immediately. And the only thing I could think that was remotely close to it is the Residents did Wormwood some years back, which was their sort of take on that, and specifically Residents like. But I think that it's strange how many people like first of all would never even think to like read it as a text. Right. And is that something? I mean, is it something where had you ever done that before? Had you ever like really even like studied that book?
I mean, both myself, Thad, who's also in the band, I grew up Catholic, and which, the joke, of course, the people who are sort of like Christians would say the nice thing about being Catholic is you never actually have to read the Bible. The whole, at least American Catholicism, the strain we were in is largely the priest takes care of that.
Yeah, he's got that covered.
Exactly.
There's a whole like class of people that do that for you. Don't worry about it.
Which is actually funny for me because like although I went to like public schools, I went to a Catholic high school. I went to an ostensibly Catholic college. That like I did sort of realize at some point I'm like there's a lot of this book that I probably should know about that I sort of don't.
And some of it is very interesting. Not a lot of it, but some of it is actually very interesting.
Sure,
it's worth
exactly.
noting.
And like, I mean, and entirely, there are whole aspects of it that are fantastic, right? There are messages in the Gospels that are great. Yes, we should feed the needy, right? Yes, we should visit the sick. Like, there's lots of good stuff. There's some lyricism in terms of some of the stuff in the Old Testament. There are good stories about people overcoming oppression. Like, there's a reason why, like, why people in extremely oppressed positions can find something in that book that has either allowed them to see their way through it, or when they know they're not going to get through it, right, been able to at least find comfort in whatever they can out of a doomed existence, right? Like, yes, it's all there. Nobody's saying that it's not. But again, was not interested in getting up and doing a song about the Beatitudes, right? It's there. If you want that, you should go ahead and read it. Like, I was much more interested in engaging with as you said, the sort of darker stuff.
Sure, and there's something, and again, for a book that is so often cited, first of all, you got to love any book that, this is the exact word of God, and then for King James, like, oh yeah, but I think what God meant to say was ... No, well, I thought it was the exact word of God. Why are you changing it? Why are you updating it? But anyway, that's again separate discussion. Yeah. The idea it can be something where it is sacred to people, right?
Sure.
It is something where they tie a lot of their identity into it. They tie a lot of their life to this text, and so it's a little fraught in that way that you don't want to, if you want to be thoughtful, you don't want to tromp on someone's ethos necessarily, right? Yeah,
and again, coming back to the question of what I feel like is it's a thing lingering in the background. I feel like it's just good to just sort of point to it and be like, and again, criticism of religion or, at large, like, which there may be arguments in that I'm sympathetic to. It's just not what we're trying to engage in here.
Right.
But
it's not what this is.
Yeah. I will say that some of the people who are the biggest heroes of mine in life are people whose primary motivation for what they do comes from religion, right? Like, you can look at Gandhi, you can look at Dr. King, you can look at any number of people who are clearly motivated by religion, who I am just like, I have a lot to learn from you. And who's going to like walk up to Gandhi and be like, this is all cool that you're like freeing this entire country, but there's no such thing as God. Like,
right. Richard Dawkins would probably do that, but anyway.
Yeah, exactly. Good. He should. Again, two noise rock dudes from New York. Who cares? Right. It's, but I also think the keeping that in mind of like, you don't want to do things that are just, again, to what you mentioned before, being controversial for the sake of doing so to get attention for yourself. I'm glad it's never been a primary motivation of ours because it's not something that I would be good at. But keeping in mind that you would like to be able to answer for something. No, none of the people who I think are who even in my personal life who are very religious, who I have a lot of respect for, I think are going to listen to my band. Like, there are different spheres of my life,
It's not a likely scenario.
Yeah, and that they're going to call me. And then, Justin, I really have lost a lot of respect for you because you have this song where you're howling about Revelations, like But still, I mean, I think it's fair as a creative check for yourself of like, if am I at least being honest, or am I voicing something that I feel like is coming from a place that is defensible, right? Which I think is what honesty is about, or am I trying to posture, right? And just having an awareness of that always as a sense of motivation is good, whether or not you are going to be confronted by that really nice priest who you met, 25 years ago.
Right. No, and that's. Boy, it's funny how much of that is tied up into things that have nothing to do with art, right? But like, it's just the idea of, because we live in a culture where people I'm outraged at this thing. I've never read, seen, heard, etc., but I'm outraged by it, and that's like just considered normal now. Where it's like it's almost like people are allergic to background research, as I think Tim Midyat said once, and it just occurs to me that you guys make nuanced music in nuanceless times, which for people that crave nuance, such as me, it's like a feast. But it kind of comes off like an alien invasion, perhaps, if you're not if that's not your vibe, right? If you're just sailing along in the seas of content and it's you're not a nuanced person, it comes off a little crazy.
I'm going to push back on you for a moment, Conan,
Sure.
because I think it's going to show that you're kind of a weirdo too. Is that so I'm sitting in the studio where we rehearse and where we have done most of our recording, and there's this 2x18 subwoofer over here that's run by 3,000 watt power amplifier. We put a drum machine into it that goes 168 beats per minute, double bass drum the whole time. In the meantime, I'm playing a guitar that literally runs through 4 distortion units, and then the bass is coming through the 215 over here, which is just mid-range, make your ears almost nobody is going to stand in front of that presentation and appreciate, and the word nuance is going to right.
Okay, fair point.
I'm glad you're there to hear it, right? And I think it's a defensible but we are in the tail end of the the bell
the bell curve.
Where everybody over here is going, that is just guys, break it up a little bit.
It's a maximalist presentation.
Way too much.
Right?
Exactly.
That's which is funny because what some might say are more minimalist compositions. I would actually argue that they're not necessarily the case. Is a maximalist presentation, and. But then again, everything's nonsense until it isn't, right? I mean, there's things that are just considered commonplace. It's you would think that this is the craziest art project in the world if this didn't have corporate money behind it and just have the familiarity of being around. And that comes with something that I have a real problem with is lack of commitment to the bit. And that's something that that's just I cleanse with flame as far as I'm concerned for that kind of thing. The Sharknado of it all. No, you can go away with that, please. That's not for me. And if there's anything that you can say about Austerity Program, the commitment to the bit is definitely there in all aspects and in all things.
That is, I appreciate that. I mean, we have found that the things that motivated us and interests of us early on have been durable, right? It's continued to be valuable. We have not. What I read is sort of the same thing of at some point I don't understand how a band say for example U2 can exist, who's maybe they're a bad example, no, but a band that's becomes a very different thing with each record, right? And oh, this record's gonna be it's gonna be a reggae record, right. On one hand,
they might have one, as far as I know. I mean, I don't know. Yeah,
but on one hand, you're a human being, you're indulging yourself for however live your life, right? You're not. It's fine. But from an audience perspective, I agree with you. I think people who show a consistent motivation are just more interesting, right? It's just. Because it seems that there's a vital expression of something going on. It's almost they have to do this, right?
Right.
And no one has to. Oh, this is our doom record. Oh, this is our black metal record. What are you doing? You're just trying on different hats, which is cool. It's fun to try on different hats, but I don't need to sit here and watch you do it. So.
Exactly.
When you say the commitment to the bit, on one hand, a bit can feel like a shtick, and that's clearly not the intention. But the idea of are you following a path? Are you on something that hopefully it's not just a hole that you're stuck in, but that it's a path that you're going down that's coherent? That's interesting to me.
No, and again, I'm not. There are people that approach things with a genuine curiosity. That's oh, okay, Neil Young doing the trans record, that was crazy. Like, is it like the best electronic record ever? No, not really, but it's pretty interesting. Like, it's worth checking out. If I've blown record store owners' minds by like, hey, you should throw this one on. It's very different. And then they're like, what? It's like, yeah, it's really into like Kraftwerk and Devo at that time, and it's interesting, but it's sort of like, a creative cul-de-sac, if not dead end, for him. And sometimes that works, and some artists can pull that off. And sometimes it's just like, it just feels like you're not, you don't have a thing, or you don't know what your thing is, or, just again, it doesn't appeal to someone like me.
Sure.
Specifically. And you're never, honestly, you're never going to like make millions appealing to someone like me. Sure. Just to be explicitly clear. And
we're the weirdos. We know where we are. Right. Yeah.
Right. Exactly. But I think that it's fascinating to see the, I guess we call it the noise rock resurgence, right? That there was, when Austerity Program came up, it was like Replicator. It was like post 90s, where it's like that was actually happening the first time, but pre kind of like Renaissance. And there's obviously, any genre of music, if it even is a genre, whatever, always has your fellow travelers, people that are operating in similar milieus, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. But I feel like now the internet, not just used to radicalize grandma anymore, can also be used to like bring people together with common interests, which is lovely and great. And that's more the promise of the pre Web 3.0, whatever we're on internet, is to bring people together with commonality of interests in niche topics and in niche musical genres, art forms, et cetera, to the point that they can find community themselves. Great. Lovely. Awesome. But it's also one of those things where the cozy circles of confirmation bias also can make those worlds seem like that's the entire world. That's like a tiny subsection of a subsection of a subsect of what we used to call a monoculture that's now been atomized into whatever corporate walled gardens allow us to interact with now. Ipso facto, with the Austerity Program as a viable creative entity, and like writing these waves and things, I feel like you've always had your North Star firmly fixed on whatever it is that you're working on. How do the songs actually come together, though? Because you have a practice space, you're in it.
Yep.
There are things in the practice space that one can assume music is played through.
Yep.
Right? But is it something where are you singing into a phone when you're out and about? Are you doinking around on the guitar at the kitchen table? Like what's going on with these songs? How do they come together?
So I
and I apologize for the James Joyce soliloquy before we got to the point, but I think it's important to mention.
No apologies needed. I want to be a little succinct in terms of how I answer it.
Sure.
There's no one way that everything that songs sort of always evolve. I will say on this record in particular, none of the original seeds of the songs, core ideas, part survived to the final version.
Oh, so it's like a Ship of Theseus thing where it starts off.
Well, except in that case, the Ship of Theseus in our case is turning into like, Achilles' car, right? It's not like at some point there, the thing that everything gets built around, the stuff that's being built around it becomes more interesting than that piece. And sometimes that happens fairly early on. There was another song that was like, I remember just like I was struggling, so it felt like we were struggling with this piece. And then it was just like this one part that we put on and be like, what if we expand that a little bit? And then like a week later, it's like, that's the song. Get rid of everything else.
That cracked the code.
And it hurt because it was like, God, I spent so much, like, for me, programming the freaking drums. Like, there's a lot of like nights of programming drums and listening to it and going back that are just like, throw that out. But
how often does the sunk cost fallacy come into the conversation when you
can't? And that's the thing. It absolutely cannot, because Because I actually think that hint, like, it's an interesting question, right? Because one could imagine, well, at what point do you ever stop and let go? Can't you just keep going back and tinkering again and then throwing out the second round of things that you did? Potentially, yeah. But I feel like it made us feel more comfortable of like what the final product was, that we could say that, like, cool, that was scaffolding, right? But what we come up with is something that is sort of helped grow out of that is actually the worthwhile thing.
And you have to have strong scaffolding to make the structure, of course. So it's not to denigrate it.
But like, I mean, one of my favorite songs on the previous record started off with just like a really ripping, awful sounding noise guitar part. And the whole song was built around that. And then like all the songwriting decisions, like, but it's gotta land on that part, right? Like it's gotta go there because it's just too, so that's fine as well. But in this time, it really felt like it was okay in all points to be like, shit, that thing that was starting this thing off, like it's got to go, because this is actually where we're really going with this. And there were 4 elements of the band. There's vocals, drums, guitar, bass. Most of the time, something like the guitar or the bass will be the thing that starts things off. And then there's just a lot of, we have, in the studio that I'm in, all the final recording that we do is onto analog tape, but the writing process all happens on Pro Tools, and just as a way to sort of document ideas and move ideas around and stuff like that. Like we'll use that as sort of as a demoing tool. And there's some value in being able to sit down and program things into a drum machine in terms of from a writing process, because it allows me to have, allows us to have like really tight control over even like when the choke of a cymbal comes in.
Yeah.
By the 8th note, by the 16th note, and how that has just a slight difference to it. Again, nuance that a few folks are going to pick up and everyone else is not going to hear it because they're too busy getting tinnitus.
But it changes the feel of the song, even if you don't know why it changes.
But so there's value, I think, in being able to like get that deeply under the hood and like, so there's a ton of that which is baked in, which again, is probably lost in the wash of the noise, but was satisfying to me from a writing perspective. But then the other problem is once that is set, like you have to, you're demoing ideas around that. No one can look at the drummer and say, well, wait a sec. Do that part now. And now do that part. Like I think happens in a lot of writing, like with a band, because the drum machine's just doing what it's told. So to put the guitar down, rush around and move the China boy from measure 1 to measure, part 1 to part 3 of the measure, like requires a thing. But we've been at this long enough that that's just the experience that we have of writing music.
And are you, when you're trying this stuff out and you're, trying it on, see if it fits, right? Are you doing it at like show volume? Are you doing it like on headphones? Are you doing it like at conversational length? All of the above?
I, in some ways, maybe a little bit less on this record than on previous ones, but tend to like the idea of the final presentation of the music that is being written is in a live setting at a loud and coherent sort of volume. Mm-hmm. So by coherent, like it's very easy for us to play very loud and sound bad because it's very dense, right?
Because there's a lot to it.
Yeah. But if we can dial in sort of the relative volume of things and make sure that the room isn't like an echoing nightmare, right? Like you will stand in front of it and you will have the sort of experience of a physical, again, sense of being overwhelmed.
Right.
And that in a way is kind of the idea of imagining how the music is being presented, right? Different than how some folks will write music to be presented in headphones. Some people write music to be presented like on a dance floor with other people. Like for us, it's that idea of loud band, relatively small room, like right in front of you. So that's sort of the intention, but like, and we will get there as we're sort of figuring things out, but doing it all at that sort of like high volume, I think would be exhausting from a writing perspective, right? Because,
It would be your ears would be so fatigued by the time you get to the third song, right?
yeah,
I mean,
you would
like,
just
there's
be
no
ready.
way.
You'd be ready to say yes to anything just to get the fucking practice over with, right? Like,
Right,
yeah,
exactly. Sounds great.
do that riff 5 times, I'm done. Like,
Approved.
Yeah,
Yeah,
exactly.
exactly. Yeah. Well, and that's the limitation, the human factor of it, right? And I think it's fascinating that the mean fail rate is like sort of invoked in so many different ways within your music, but the humanity is always, if not being immediately addressed, always something that is there, including with how the music is presented. And again, that's coming to someone that I've seen you play in bigger places, seen you play in the hallway in Don Pedro, right? And it was sort of like, oh, here it is. Okay, let's strap in, bitch. Let's go. In a good way, but it's something where I feel like it's all very calculated, even though one of your records is beyond calculation. And I always appreciated the thoughtfulness behind the thoughtlessness. And you can quote me on that if you want to, by the way. And so it's something that, but it's just like, it's such a crazed balance beam.
Yeah.
When is it? How do you know? Is there any such thing as too far or too much, or do you know like, oh, that's there's not enough there to justify doing that?
I mean, I could say 2 areas of I think of the 2 areas to sort of navigate that have attention to them are, one of them is the fact that, so we're a band, we play with a drum machine. So setting aside the performance aspect of it, the listening to it, you could imagine, and I think the default that a lot of people have tended to go through is to sort of create, like, you're going to have a drum machine that is going to sound very clinical. It's going to sound very tight. And the instruments that are around it are going to also occupy a very distinct and, frankly, sort of sterile approach. And I have just not ever found that to be the most satisfying way to listen to music. Without getting too technical about it, not that, I mean, you would be fine with that. I'm sure that anybody who is, like, I don't need to hear about different stereo pickup patterns on microphones, but like, I like to hear music that I'm just enjoy a little bit of acoustic clue to that. This is a sound that happened in a space, right? There's some music that I'm totally fine with that not being the case, right? There's a fair amount of like electronic music that's just sounds like, simple raw synth stuff, and it's like, and there's like, it sounds like it's coming from from outer space or whatever, and that's fine. But for this type of music, being able to, we record the drum machine onto 2 tracks of our 8-track left and right channel, and then we'll go back and we will play that back through the speakers that you see behind me. And I set up a really nice room mic about where I'm sitting, and we record that onto 2 other tracks. So you get the stereo presentation. It's kept fairly minimal, but so it doesn't overwhelm things, but you feel the room, right? Like
the physicality of it.
Exactly.
Sure. Yeah.
And so, and the music and the guitar that, again, we're playing it's a very abnormal sounding instrument. I mean, to you and I who listen to lots of like noise rock, it's like, oh yeah, that's just, and some people can pick the pedals up, but to most people they'd be like, a guitar is a 6-string thing that like sounds, that you should play flamenco on. It shouldn't sound like something like is
like a jackhammer or
going into
whatever.
failure. Yeah, exactly. Similarly on the bass, right? Like, so these are very artificialized present, versions of acoustic things, but I still like to hear that happening in a space, right? And so that's what, now walking down that balance beam to me is interesting, right? Like that's kind of a fun thing to do. The other thing that I think is a little trickier is that I have heard really, really intense I'm probably the most sort of the best version of this is like really intense, like metal bands that are like play extremely complicated music, very fast, very overwhelming and punishing stuff. Like when you put the record on, and then you will go and see those bands play, and it is boring because there's zero space. Right. And I think
every available measure is filled with a thing. Yeah.
And all anybody can do to stay on top of any of it is stand firmly planted where they're at. Right. And make the minimalist amount of moves to create that thing. Cause they've got to do it 50 more times in that same fucking second. Right. So the drummer's is using triggers and and if you compare that as just an audience thing against who, some of the classic, things that I know were seminal for you and for me.
Look at a Flipper or something, right?
Or the number one thing I always will think of is the Jesus Lizard, playing with all that space. But from an audience perspective, it was terrifying in a way that because you felt there was something genuinely scary happening in front of you in a way that just watching somebody who's just dressed up in battle gear, going like this really quick. I'm glad you can do. So there's making dense, fast music that translates that sense of real emotional danger, whatever you want to call it. There's a real tension there that if you start playing too fast and too technical and there's just too much going on, it just turns into a wash, and it doesn't bring you in as an audience member, right?
Well, and there's something to be said for the human experience of experiencing the music too. That it's gonna seem it's like with mastering, right? If you just have one gigantic bar, everything at the same volume, then it doesn't matter. Whereas if you have peaks and valleys, then it's you get to drop it down low, and then you get to go up high, and it's going to be something where it's going to feel different in that way that the Jesus Lizard feels like a kaiju, like Godzilla's coming or so. Oh my god! Whereas technical metal band, it's just it's fast. I like things that are fast. Okay, well there you go. It's fast. Congratulations.
Which and again, there is a thing that can and does happen there that is interesting and engaging for what it is, right? But I think if you want to,
it exhausts me personally. But yeah, I mean, it's
if you compare that as an experience to something that yes does have more dynamics, does breathe a bit more, right? In a way, it doesn't sound as tough because it's not as fast, and there's a lot of conventions that are not being employed of blast beats and tremolo picking or whatever. But the actual standing in front of it is just to me, it's self-evident that one of those is just much more of a engaging audience perspective. Not just this is cool. I prefer this to that, but even just in terms of the sense of, again, coming back to that sense of being overwhelmed and being taken out of your moment.
Right.
So being able to be how is it that we're making music that is very caustic and dense and full, but not in a way which loses people in the moment, because it just is, as your point is, everything is brickline redlining the whole time.
Yeah. And that's, again, talk about another balance beam, right? Because it's because there's always there's the entertainment value and the challenging aspect. If you're attempting to do something you're inviting someone on a journey to oh, that's different, that's cool, that's one thing. But if you're hey, here's something deeply inscrutable you're not gonna be able to understand, good luck. And there's something to be said for that too, for just the effort aspect, I guess. But I find myself less interested in that as time goes on, as an ethos. Let's put it that way.
I get that, but I will be honest that and this is simply my opinion, I actually think that when people are redlining everything, whatever however you're sort of saying it, putting it in front of you and here, deal with it. It's not, in fact, coming from a place of singular motivation, right? Of just I have seen a few way out there sort of metal artists who you're I don't even know what I just saw, and it hurt, and I don't know if it was good, but those guys were bent, right? Like
Yeah,
I have seen that.
That was the vision, and I experienced the vision.
Right? But that is a very rare experience, and a lot more you feel again like it's you're watching people carry out an act that has boxes to check. Did we?
Yeah. Were there blast beats?
Was
there corpse paint? Was there?
And it's and like I pick on metal because it's a world that like I kind of know the ins and outs of well, and it's easy to see it when it's like and it's not going well, but like I think it's a similar thing in lots of places. Like when people are putting on, they're checking the boxes and they're putting it in front of you. Like it's, it might and again that or hardcore music or something like that. If a little bit of it's like you didn't like it, I guess you're not tough enough. I guess you're a pussy. You can handle it. It's like no,
right? Like no.
I just didn't find it interesting that everything you did seemed to be interchangeable with 50 other bands. Like what is this? What is it about what you just did that makes me want to?
What makes that interesting or worthwhile or cool?
Makes me feel that any of that was sincere, or are you just doing a very good job of playing a role? Which good, go do it. Again, it's fun. You're U2 or whomever you want to put on your reggae record. Great, go do it. I have no interest in spending my time with it, but best of luck.
Yeah, well, and that's again, it's something where it depends on what you're looking for as well, but also there can be bands that just you see them and you're like, I have no idea where this band's coming from. I don't know what's happening, and it's terrifying. Like Couch Slut was like that for me. Because first time I ever saw them, I'd vaguely heard like one song, couldn't pick it out of a lineup, right? I was like, yeah, sounds great. And I saw them, they closed out second night of the first Caterwaul, and I was like, I just feel like I saw something I should not have seen. Like, I feel like I saw a woman tear herself inside out on stage. And that was both terrifying and interesting and almost impossible to describe. And I was blown away. But but other than like, wow, it's a unique experience that I don't know if anyone should try to replicate, let alone could you. How would I explain Couch Slut? Well, sometimes you don't need to. Sometimes you just see something that's like, oh, that's a unique and special thing that happened that you got to be a part of. But I don't think culturally we tend to value that. I think we tend to overvalue the familiar now. So if nothing else, because a lot of these walled gardens that everybody utilizes have found great ways to monetize it. Just as nostalgia has been weaponized as well, that people can react to things in a way where rather than being like that's funny, it'd be like that's stupid. If that makes sense, right? Like where there's a twins of the negative attached to it because of the unfamiliarity to it. And I think it can be so recursive and can also just be too dismissive of art to have cultural touch points, right? I love Big Black. Big Black is great. I don't think about Big Black very much because I listened to them relentlessly when I was younger. If you got a drum machine in your band, you're going to be compared to Big Black. Congratulations. Until the end of time. There's worse things to be done than compared to geniuses, right? Okay, no problem. But Austerity Program does something so different than what Big Black did because, of course, the different epoch of time, different era, different decades, and it's crazy that people need to have. The notch in the cliff to climbing in some cases to be so simplistic. Like, really? That's what you needed? That's what you needed to listen to this? Like, okay, fine. Then that's what it is. Great. Are you listening to it now? Great. Now engage with it on the face of it. And then people do. And then the boulder rolls down the hill, et cetera, et cetera. But it's like these metal bands that we're tangentially goofing on with good reason. We all know what that is. We've all seen it. We've all seen them, picking away. Oh no, they look so terrifying in their makeup. Oh yeah, it's absolutely horrifying. And everyone's having a good old time. They're at the metal show. They can discuss whether or not it's true metal. Like whatever floats your boat. That's something that the community seems to enjoy. Good on them. I'm not trying to yuck anybody's yum, as they say. But I feel like most of my most favorite bands are just this deeply inscrutable freaks.
Yeah.
Yourself inclusive, peace and love in my heart. But where it's just like, look, man, I don't know. Like, just it's nuts. You got to check it out. And that's coming from someone that has literally been paid to be articulate about music. Like, I'm like, it's overwhelming, but in a good way. I don't know, and I think that's something that culturally we're not predisposed to want to give a try to now. And I feel like this is something that I've been harping on for the past like half of a decade, that I feel like as we've sort of lost touch with causality itself, and everything happens in constant present tense, then nostalgia becomes easier to utilize because we know what worked in the past, right? See why a certain segment of 80s pop never seems to go away, ever. But it's also like, yeah, the 80s actually weren't really like that, though. Like, that was like there's way more brown. It was listening to more brown. And the lack of interest in the brownness of it all is fascinating to me, because when you talk about art that transgresses and that changes your perspective or makes you question your precepts of what it is you're watching. I mean, honestly, just the like, where's the drummer is huge. Yeah, I'm having dealt with sound people worldwide. I'm sure you can attest to that, where people don't even know what to contend with. Like, what is a DJ set? What is Oh no, it's definitely not a DJ set. And it's something where I guess it's the problem of pioneering a thing, right? Is that you're pioneering a thing. You're out on your own. You're on the land. You want to be respectful to the natives, but you're trying to get to the Oregon Trail, right? And
I can see why someone I get the gist of what you're saying. I might choose for cultural reasons a slightly different metaphor. But
I'm wandering into some insensitive territory for sure. But I am from the Oregon Trail generation, so what can I say? That there's a framework for speed metal or death metal or whatever, thousands of like sub-entries. Like, I mean, I honestly am envious of the metal culture and the community the quick community they can have with each other and the quick affinity that they can have with each other. Whereas I feel like with whatever I'm into, it's like the Venn diagram of who hates conservatives, hates liberals, hates leftists, and like you have like leftists and like liberals and moderates and conservatives, and everybody hates leftists, including leftists on there. That's my world. And I feel like that way with genre sometimes too, where like there's no one more critical to experimental music than me, but I also love it dearly. And that's why I'm so goddamn critical of it, because when it's done well, goddamn, it's done well, and it's so frequently not. And so so when you're out on your own with it, right? Is there a too far?
I would say the instinct of what draws us to make the music that we do is largely, is a homegrown one, right? The call we're coming from largely is one that comes from internal,
inside the house.
Yeah, sure. And the net result of that, I think, is it has been great, to be able to connect with folks who, with whom we sort of had a sense of affinity and community. It is great to go out to Caterwall and like be in a place where like a bunch of people are just excited to sort of see us, where we get to see bands that we're excited to see. It, we were on a record label for a while that was just a bunch of like, it was a great community of folks. If you think of the sort of the electrical audio board, and so many of the folks who've been offshoots out of that, they're great areas of community. So those things are like very valuable in terms of like things that happen around the band that we really like. But because we're not answering as much of a sort of like dialogue in the music that we're sort of creating. Like I'm trying to sort of like be maybe a little more generous than you are, Conan, in terms of what I'll afford to people who are in genre types of bands, right? Sure. Let's imagine.
I am prone to hyperbole.
Sure,
it's a thing. I'm known for it.
But I mean, let's imagine that the intention of that is to be in like regular dialogue. Like, who's going to take this thing and push it further? Like, oh, you guys did that on your record, and we're going to do that. And like, that's great. Like, but if that's, and then so your question around like, are the choices that we're making sort of the right ones? Does this feel satisfying to sort of what it is we're trying to do? You have lots of cues, I think, to sort of navigate that when you can situate what you're doing in the sense of it being a ready conversation with other people, right? A nice way of saying what on the flip side is, right? Like if you're, if you don't have any interest in sort of thinking for yourself and you're just sort of looking for cues from other people on what you should do next, right? You never have to sort of like, it's always a question of just paying attention. The downside or whatever of even though participating in community has been great, like that has been ancillary to the idea of being like, we just want to get together and create and make music that like we just have to do, like, because nobody else is doing it. We want to hear this songs and these music, and no one else is going to give it to us. Like if we want to hear these songs, we want to hear this type of music, if we want to create these types of records, we are the ones who are going to have to do it.
Right.
There are like, I think really the main thing that I'm most critical of at this point is I don't want to go back and retread ground that we've already done, right?
Because you've made those records.
Yeah, and because it also might mean like I get a little worried off of the last record. I'm about to sort of like talk something about the record we're coming out that is not like, oh my god, it's always the greatest thing ever. But one thing that concerned me about it, like when it was all done, was looking at it and being like, we tend to write songs that have a particular length to them, right?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, and I like that's not necessarily a bad thing.
No,
but I have to sort of ask myself, like, what's up with that? Like, why are we doing that, right? Like, and if I can come up with a reason for it, that's great. And I would say those conventions that you move into, I statement, those conventions that we might move into that we're not aware of, worry me because they're potential evidence of like it's stale. Like you're doing the thing you always do, you don't even know how to do it, right? And I would make a distinction between that and the deliberate sort of boundaries that we choose to draw around the type of music that we make. Most simply, it is always 4 elements, right? It is always guitar, bass, drums, and then usually vocals. Mm-hmm. But like, we're like not going to bring in 2 keyboard players. We are not going to like.
That would be surprising. Yes.
Well, yeah, I mean, but like for some people, like again, going way back to one of the first things we talked about, a sense of like of coherence and purpose that has a thread going to it. I think there's lots of music that I really like that has elements to it that we would never touch, right? There's some fantastic melody music, like Jamaican ska. I totally love, in part because they just have some of the best of it. Just has melodies that are just like,
get stuck in your head. Sure, absolutely. Like,
great, love it. Not a button that we would ever press and deliberately frequently don't press, right? Right. So you have the things that I think define who you are, that you are sort of making, that like these are the constraints that we're trying to sort of operate in. Let's get as much out of this, and then what happens if we turn it this way, and then what happens if we do it this way? But it's all sort of in the same box. That's a different thing than those guys always do the exact same thing in this department. Right. And I don't think they know it, right? Like that's the thing that...
Should we tell them? Yeah.
So the long way I would say to answer your question is like, what's too far is really a way of, I think, of us asking like, well, what's the stick that you're measuring by when when you can't look around and be like, oh, we got to go do it this way because that's where everyone else is running, right? Like, if you know that you're out over here, what's your roadmap to sort of decide that you're in the right direction? I think it's trying to be as clear-eyed as possible about what it is you want to do, and are you really getting there? And are there things that you're getting lazy about?
Well, and at some point, you're both in conversation and in competition with yourself.
Yeah. Oh, entirely. Right. Yeah.
And that's, and if you're not, I mean, I don't even know what you're doing.
Right.
Like maybe that's Jan Dick or something. I don't know. I don't know what Jan Dick's catching shrapnel, but I'm just trying to think of someone randomly with a lot of records, and that's who came to mind. And I feel like it's interesting because the model of presentation of the band, as well as the distribution system, like I think the whole controlled burn thing is fascinating.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, you mentioned in passing, the record label that you used to be on, that of course is no more.
Yep.
As well now, Hydra Head, and then I found it so fascinating when you basically you teamed up with Nonagon, right, and made a purposefully niche labor of love self-founded distribution system called Control Burn, and which at this point has been around for a while.
Yeah, I think 12 or 13 years. Yeah.
Yeah, and that's something that I feel like's been normalized now, which is maybe the wrong term to use, but as far as mainstreamed, maybe in a way that was not the case before. And anyone that comes from punk rock or DIY, whatever you want to call it, it's not like a foreign concept, like because there's so many models of the Discord, touch and go, alternative tentacles, et cetera. Like, look, I'm just going to put these. No one else is going to do it. I'm going to put these records out, and ideally there will be people that want to hear them, and which is always the hope, right?
Yeah.
At least once you have money on the line, it's like I sure do hope some people want to hear these records. Would be nice, right? But how have you found that experience, and how, if at all, has it changed the process of being the Austerity Program?
I mean, the second question is easier to answer than the first. It's wonderfully, fantastically slowed things down, right? Like the
Right.
we, I have probably mentioned this in the past, but when we started off, there was like literally a year and a half when we started the label off, there was literally about a year and a half when we almost didn't practice at all. Thad, who's a professor of public finance, I have a degree in finance as well. We were like, we are not going to sell enough records between us and Nonagon, where any other projects that are on this thing. We're not going to sell enough records to be able to afford an accountant.
Yeah, you're not going to buy a house with polonium. Yeah, exactly.
No, I'm not talking about buying a house. I'm talking about paying an accountant.
Right.
Because if the label generates
yeah.
$500 a year in profit, right?
Which you're doing great in the indie world, sure.
Yeah, and you've got to then go pay someone $500 to file your taxes right? So we were like, well, we'll just figure out how to do our accounting and taxes on our own, right? How hard can it be? And it was really difficult.
It sucks, as it turns out.
Well, but it was like there would literally be nights when I would say to Thad, okay, you and I have 3 hours, we can practice tonight, or we can sit down and work on this ledger idea that we've been working on and be like, well, that's the music's always going to be there, right? But like we've got to figure this thing out, right? So there was a lot of carrying and feeding of this entity, which is intended to be extremely bare bones. It is essentially just supposed to be a pass through to be able to get attention and resources strictly to the bands who are on it. So in terms of how it's affected the band, it slowed things down, but also on the other hand, it's it has fully allowed us any of the decisions that we want to make. Like no one's telling us that we sort of can't do it. I would say the experience of running the label is interesting because the primary players in it are myself, John Hasty from Nonagon. Our instincts of what to do and how to do it largely come from the ecosphere that you talked about earlier, right? The independent record labels that really, I think, started in the 80s and really flowered in the 90s that were about presenting bands in a particular way, but also were really about here's how you communicate with audience, here's how you're creating vinyl records, and they're going out to, they're creating physical objects and that. And that was satisfying for us because it's like, this is what our favorite stuff folks have done. We're going to sort of do a similar, sort of much smaller version of the same thing. Right now in 2025, creating and presenting music to as wide an audience as possible relies very little on that stuff, right? It relies very little on, in some ways, like physical records. Most people are not.
It's a niche item in the larger scheme of things in the world of music.
Absolutely, yes. Right? Like a label should be a lot more about, and I'm going to say this in ways that I know are probably going to make your eyes roll. To some ways, they make my eyes roll because it seems very goofy to us. But the label is about getting bands onto playlists. It is about getting your music featured and playing in TikTok. It is about partnering up what you're doing with ways of paying attention to social media, etc., that people can connect to. I've heard that song before, right? Because I saw it on this reel or whatever. And that is very ill-suited to, we're going to print up 600 records and we're going to call up record stores and try and get them to hold 5 of and so
I literally did some consignments today, by the way, that's why I'm laughing. But
but here's the thing: our audience and the audience of Notagon, in this they are going to be fine to the extent that they are continuing to buy records and paying attention. It is an aging audience. It is a group of folks who
it's for who it's for. They want the item as a token.
And if you're. And they will appreciate, for whatever reason, some because they like to have the permanence of the object. Some of them, they like to look at the whole thing. Some people just record collectors. But the idea of, you're on a record label that I can go onto a website and I can buy a t-shirt and a record and maybe get a file I can download. That satisfies me as an audience member that I participate. That's what I want from the bands I listen to. Right.
Right.
That is what we learned. That's how we sort of operate. But it is a increasingly smaller sense of how new folks are getting into stuff, right?
Especially younger folks. They don't interact in any way, shape, or form in that way. It doesn't. It's a foreign concept.
Yeah. So I with this record really in particular, I felt there are choices we can make to engage with what we think that the sort of the more common way that people of trying to get onto playlists, trying to figure out ways of partnering the music with other types of media. And I don't think we're good at that. And I don't think we're,
I shouldn't laugh, but it's,
it's totally fine. Right. Yeah. But I want to be totally clear-eyed about it. Right. And we certainly can't rely on our label to do that for us. If we had visions of wanting to have that be the future that we sort of pursue with the band, we should really be out trying to talk to and learn from the people who are doing that well now, right?
Right.
Now, why someone, 23-year-old who's successfully running their version of a punk label that is plugged into doing all that and would want to deal with two 50-year-olds from New York City is one question, but it's a moot question,
right? Because
we're satisfied with sort of engaging with the audience that we know in the way that we're comfortable doing it.
Mm-hmm.
And to some degree, I think it's helpful to be clear-eyed about the fact that is a sunsetting approach, or it is an increasingly niche approach, and it's fine, right? And there's no sense in getting mad about it, of saying geez, that this means that how come we're not blowing up? Well, this is what blowing up looks like, and we're blowing up in path A. You are clearly in column B here. So be fine and comfortable with that. Exactly. So it's
you missed that exit.
Yeah. So I don't want and frankly, I talked to John Hasty about this from time to time, and there's questions about I don't know, should we try and do this? Should we try and do that? This seems to be what people are doing. And we're we don't feel equipped to sort of make those decisions in a way of I know how to do this right. It's all very should we open up a TikTok account? I don't know what that would look like. I don't know how, I can figure out. I'm not a Luddite. I know how to register for a fucking account for something, right? That's not the concern. Yeah. I always lose my passwords. That's not what I'm talking about.
Right. But are you doing something of meaning or worth to it, or are you just doing it because I guess this is what people are doing? And does it fit the vision Because again, what you're talking about with the label is, the ones that we're talking about that were, sort of inspirations or templates or touchstones. There's an ethos to it, and there was a set of if not moral code, a set of standards and practices, as they say in older school times, that you want to fit to what that means. It would be weird if Ian MacKaye was doing TikTok dances.
That's true. Although
I wouldn't be against it, but I would be surprised.
I would think that there are people whose primary motivation for wanting to create an alternative type of value-based community, right? That's right. That's really what the core of, I think, those labels and the scenes around them really sort of did. That entirely can navigate that world, right?
You're stripping out the elements that don't matter. Necessarily,
but
right?
that Ian MacKaye quotes of 2025, the 17-year-old who's like, well, fuck this, we're just going to do this ourselves, me and my friends, and we're going to be fair and fuck all these guys. But they're not going to run out to a pressing plant and get 700 and 7 inches of the 2025 Teen Idols thing, right? It might be a TikTok dance. It might I don't know, and I don't feel equipped to sort of describe what that would look like. Yeah. I just know what it is not going to look like is Discord records of we're going to put our prices on our records because fuck you, CD players.
Because that was the battle of the time.
Yeah, exactly.
Right. And now it's so quaint.
Yeah.
It's it's adorable.
It's totally appropriate for what it was in the moment that it is.
Sure.
But that's not the moment that we're sort of in anymore. And I just sort of recognize that we're used to playing and understanding that game better enough. So.
Right. And there is a certain element of, I don't want to have to care about that. I just want to do the things that I want to do. That's absolutely true.
And I would say it's less because it's not that I'm a stick in the mud about new stuff. It's more that it's we feel confident about being able to operate in the things that we know how to do. Mm-hmm. And I don't feel like I could engage in the idea of making a TikTok video or figuring out the playlist game in a way that makes me feel here's a way that we can sort of express ourselves in a way that's uniquely us. I would feel like I was entirely doing what those guys do. I guess that's what we got to do. And to the extent I can minimize that in any of the band stuff, I will minimize that because it's not satisfying for what primarily motivates me to sort of make music and be in a band.
Understood. But then also, you have your own niche, right? Because, I can't think of any other band that offers their music up on 1/4-inch analog tape reel.
Yeah. Well, we're in the you're getting about as niche as you can possibly.
Yeah, it's about as niche as you can.
Counting on fingers on your hands or knees. But yes, anybody, I will always say, anybody who's listening to any of this who says, you know what, I'd really like to have a copy of this, any record that we make on 1/4-inch, send us an email. You will basically pay for the cost of the reel, and my giggling is I'm making a copy of the thing. Yeah.
But it's also that's a aspect of it. Something that I feel like is generationally timeless is when an artist or band kind of knows itself and follows its own North Star in a way that I was talking to Brian Cook about that, and we just the sort of sadness that we've felt seeing friends and compatriots doing the thing. Oh, they're doing the thing that they think they're supposed to do. They got the front facing camera and they're dressing, and it's like a hair shirt, and you can tell, and you feel secondhand embarrassment for them when they're doing it. It's like, oh, just don't do that. Just don't do that. It's not for you. It's okay. It's okay for that not to be for you. But then that's the pressure of, again, moving at the pace of all these tech companies and these walled gardens that is, adopted the move fast break things. That's supposed to be what you do with the other aspects of being art that are not art, that have changed into being vocations for some people, which is just used to be promo. And it's no, that's now the thing. Now you want to be an influencer. You want to be the person that you want to get lots of subs. For what? For you. No, for what? For what court? Like, for what action? What art? Oh no, just for you, your personality.
Mm-hmm.
Which, when you come from our generation, is like, what? What are you talking about? Like, it just doesn't even make sense, right? Because it's like we didn't grow up with that. We didn't grow up with the internet as it is now being around.
I don't know. I feel like I've seen that has been a very common instinct in whatever way it's manifested itself throughout my entire, like, I've always seen people who it seems are like, again, are doing the thing because they feel like it's the thing that they're supposed to do. Right. Like, and,
Sure.
And again, like there's no holier than thou thing, I will say.
Oh no. I mean, like, look, there's all kinds of things I used to get mad about that I'm like, I can't imagine having that kind of energy anymore now. But it's just like, sometimes it's just like, oh, I wish that you could find a way to do this that is less ill-fitting.
Yeah. But also, I mean,
I'm also not the audience. Fine.
True. But I think that it's like, there are some things that we have to do to just sort of participate in being in a band. But I say we, I mean myself and Thad, but you can certainly consider yourself a part of this, that are just like, these are the gotta do's that it's like, all right, this is a bit of a slog, but like we have to sort of go through this to sort of get to the other side of it. Right.
Find a way to do it that doesn't make your soul die.
But yeah, like, yeah. And that doesn't feel inauthentic, but like, it's just
feel inauthentic. Right?
You're recognizing that this is just a piece that we sort of have to do. There are, and I also will say, in some ways, being on our own record label, and this is in Hydra Head was always totally cool with us doing this, is like, there are some things that I feel like, you know what, there's a way to engage in this thing that I actually do think we could sort of be creative about it, right? Like, like putting together a band bio or putting together a press release or something like that. Okay, they're dumb and they're shitty things, but there's ways to do it that you can have fun with it, right? There's ways to do it that you can sort of be like, let me imagine myself on the other sid of this, and what would I like to get from somebody, and then create that because it's fun, right?
You did that the way back when you did the what was it, Black Madonna, right? You did like the promo, I think it's on YouTube, right? like that's sort of like the black metal riffs and all that. Great,
exactly. That was our promo video, and we tended to do like one promo video every record, and they're usually just sort of like to indulge a particular kind of interest in thing. But primarily, I think the core thing that Thad and I will always talk about in terms of what motivates us is like, if it's going to play a show, if it's going to do any sort of thing, as we said, like, is this something that we find enjoyable and fulfilling? Like beyond some of the dreck. Okay, you have to drive 3 hours to play that show, but when you get there, you're going to meet some fantastic people, and it's going to be a weird experience. So yes, the drive's going to suck, and you're going to have to work tomorrow morning, which means you got to drive back tonight. That is necessary bullshit you just got to deal with.
Right.
But that's different than participating in something where you, as you're doing it, to your point of doing the bit and you're watching what looks like people die inside, you really are not genuinely in, like, it feels alien, fake. You just like, it is a negative experience for you. Why would you ever choose to have that be something that you're associating your creative experience with? Right. Like, don't just don't do that shit. Right. Like, not because you look dumb, not because you're not good at it. Not maybe if you like to chase from trend to trend, and you like to and do a bunch of stuff that looks clunkier and worse over time, but you genuinely just get a crazy kick out of it. Live your life. I am not going to pay any attention to it, but go for it. Right? Maybe
you like trying on different hats.
Exactly.
Okay, great. That 3-cornered hat doesn't look very good on you. Well, then don't wear it.
But if like you find yourself doing the thing of being like, oh shit, man, we have to go do this thing because it's like, this is what you got to do now. Right. Like, no, you don't, just because it like, and if you don't feel compelled to sort of go, and some people can probably play the part and act very well. And you and I might think that we're well attuned to when people sort of bullshit meter on us. But at the end of the day, the only person who really knows is the person who's engaging in that. Right. Like, and I just wouldn't wish that poison on anybody, just as a thing.
And something, and I've personally found myself evolving in my mindset about that. And which is to say that, it's the same way that I've come around to music that I, maybe at one point, that sucks, that's bad. I'm like, that is not for me. Yeah. That I'll just be like, I'm not the audience for that, and that's fine. There's people that are, it's working for them. Cool. I'm not the audience for it. I'll be over in my, my weirdo dark corner over there, and that's fine. And I think it's I think you can have a more peaceable life if you look at things that way rather than being like sort of orthodox, if you will, about it.
Absolutely.
Didactic. So, Austerity Program. It's funny because like in your all your bios are always very funny, like and I think you mentioned similar to last Austerity Program record, great, funny, true also, but yeah, you mentioned Sumac, Young Widows, Kenmo. These are all bands that like they're heavy, songs are interesting, but they have their own aesthetic, they have their own kind of worldview, their own kind of built world, really. Mm-hmm. And I find that to be interesting because that's I don't even know if it's the damning praise of our day so much as it is like of 3 or 4 years ago of just like, well, what bands do you sound like? Well, most of the bands I love be like nothing. Mm-hmm. They sound like themselves is what they sound like, but you always have to like,
sure.
Check the boxes.
Recommended if you like, sure.
Recommended if you like, indeed. Which I used to excel at. Now it's like I'd be paralyzed by an analysis paralysis if you tried to ask me this today.
And it's an easy thing to hate on, but it's also like there's a certain point you can appreciate. Like people are just there's so many choices. Like give me some frame of reference to sort of even decide if I want to open a door. Like fine, good. Which is why we would put that on a bio. Like if it's not because we're trying to tell people like we're the next.
Right. If it said Sugar Ray, Hoobastank, and U2, you're like, well, I know that's not for me.
Exactly. Right. Actually, thank you. Because those folks should go pursue this, right? Like,
fantastic. Like next.
Exactly.
Which and that's what's funny too, is because everyone's trying to be, there's this mindset of like, well, let's try to. What do people like? What were you gonna fool people into listening to your music? Like, I mean, what do you expect to get out of that? That's like they're not gonna like they're gonna realize pretty quickly that anyway, whatever. That's a niche complaint.
I'm gonna coin a new phrase now. I think so. Rather than RIYL, it's NIYDL. So that's not recommended if you don't like. Right?
That is a much more useful descriptor.
Yeah, exactly.
Yes, absolutely. That's great.
I think of that same RIYL. Like it's actually it should just be those 2 extra letters, and then it's much more helpful.
God, that'd be a godsend, says the atheist. Yeah, absolutely. That'd be fantastic. No, but it's. But then also, it can be something where if you see a favorite band, you're like, oh, okay, they invoke that. Oh, that's interesting. Mm-hmm. And then you're like, well, it's not that it really sounds like that, but I see they're coming from a similar place mindset-wise. Yep. And that can be very valuable as well. I do like the not recommended if you like. That's good. That's some distinction. It's an idea factory here. We're throwing them out for free, people. Mm-hmm. Let's do this. So. Getting back to the Bible songs, right? Mm-hmm. Like this is there's never. I feel like there's always time for conflict, but I feel like we're in deeply conflicted times. If you have an ounce of empathy in this world, that I don't know. Panic prophecy, right? I think that was a phrase that was invoked in the press kit. Yeah, I think there's always a good time for that if done well. I think it's a really difficult time to do much of anything at all, let alone anything creative to get it out in the world. But then again, when isn't it? Mm-hmm. Right? Sort of like the other way to look at it. How do you feel about getting out in the world? I've noticed you are getting out more into the world. You just played a show in Boston, I believe, like last week at the time of this recording. Famously, Austerity Program, not a band that you will see on tour for 6 months out of the year. Mm-hmm. You're more adventure based, is how I would characterize it. There's always a good reason to play more shows when you got a new record. You got units to move, right? Got to move those units, otherwise the record label head's going to be mad. What can folks expect if anything, with the release of Bible songs too, as far as there being like Austerity Program live experiences?
Yeah, I would say we're sort of in the process of setting up a number of sort of weekend bites that are sort of within general distance of us. And then I think that there's a chance that that if we can plan stuff far enough in advance, you can buy cheap enough plane tickets to do similarly to what we did with Caterwaul, which is sort of like a fly-in, do 1 or 2 or 3 shows, and then sort of head back to where we're going. So I think it's sort of putting those things. Those are coming together. There's not a list of dates that I could sort of throw out in front of you yet. And really, it's because this is coming back to the DIY thing. This is like, okay, like now the whole record's out. Like now, what are we gonna? Now we have to sort of think about places to go play. But that's in the offing, coming up. Yeah, so I'll answer that question and not others that you didn't ask.
No, but I mean, that's a question that's like like a multi-tiered. It's like an iceberg of a question. Most of it's going to be beneath the water. But I think that's it's part of the process of being a band, but also one of the challenges as you have real life commitments that. You can't just all right, let's go, let's get my what is it, the bindle, the stick in the bindle, let's go on the road, everybody. But there is something when you have the satisfaction of making something that you love and putting it out into the world. It's nice to be able to share it as well. Yeah. So it's a lovely thing to be able to do. Yeah, I mean, it seems like, just like the other one, it seems like some of these songs would be very satisfying to both play and hear live.
Yeah. And
right.
Yeah. I did a pair of shows last weekend, which again was really just sort of a chance to sort of go out and, dip into a couple of small scenes and have a chance to sort of meet some people and play music with them. Again, starting off from that instinct of liking to have the physical presence of music be sort of one of the core things that drives the motivation of the band. Playing shows is fun, right? Like this, going out and seeing different people. Will be very interested to listen to the reports that you have from Japan, because that just sounds like it was such a fantastic thing.
It really was. And when I started thinking about all the things I want to include, I'm like, okay, we're probably talking about at least a half hour of me talking. So like, I don't think I can like shoehorn this into someone else's episode without being a real prick. But then people are genuinely curious. I'm like, well, rather than having the same conversation like 20 times, why don't I put it all in one place? And yeah. But I think we're similar people in the fact that we're interested in that kind of thing, the mechanics of it, and the specifics of it. The financial feasibility, if so, of it, things along those lines, right?
Yeah, I mean, we've had Thad and I are, again, just thinking of guideposts that govern behavior. While we are not doing this full time, and we sort of have other full-time jobs and we have other obligations in life and stuff. It seems responsible to be in a band in a way that is self-sufficient from a financial perspective, just because it's like you're not draining your finances to indulge things that sort of don't merit that. But also I think for us it's just been helpful to sort of be like, you're not going to do a triple gatefold record, right? Like because it's you're not exactly gonna, like any of the flights of fancy. They're like, well, I got to raise my job. I guess I could afford this. And like, I would entirely say, right, like at no point of all of the stuff that we have bought to sort of invest in the project of making music is this ever going to turn into sort of a net positive thing for us in terms of like the instruments that we bought, the time we spent recording, the building the room that I'm in. Like,
it would be an unlikely series of events.
It's not going to happen, which is fine. But like, as we do things like we're going to put a record out, how many should we press? What choices should we make around some of these things? Can we be more economical about it? That's just seems it's a good instinct to sort of do. And also, it's as much fun as it is to play shows. It's not much fun to wait around for 2 hours in a club to only see like 4 people come in, and then 2 of them are there at the end of the show, right? Like that's a singularly not enjoyable experience, and it's something that I wouldn't trust anybody who's a musician who hasn't had that experience at least once. But I think it also guides you into us into thinking about like making choices around like, oh yeah, we should bite off way more than we can chew. Well, we will regret that, right? So that's why I think our instinct of keeping things into a couple of different, weekends or something like that, or if we can hook along with somebody who's sort of a bigger draw, like that's all great. But that's part of the reason about why we keep our road life fairly limited.
Well, yeah, because we've all seen the bands that they go really hard on, playing lots of shows and going on tour for a really long time. Then they burn out. Sure. And then it's like the band like has to go on hiatus or breaks up. And it's like, okay, well, you could have just gone like, 1/3 as hard and
maybe
kept your band around.
Yeah.
Because it does. I mean, and there are things and there are times that you did everything right and it just didn't matter.
Sure.
It's just, the 2 people at the end of the night. You're like, well, that's just the way it went.
Yeah.
All right. It's not an indictment on the mission. It's not an indictment on like the art. It's just the way it is.
Well, and going back to a thing that we said before, you and I may not have very many things to talk about. We just keep talking about them in different ways. Which is fine.
Paraphrasing. I'm a big paraphraser. Yeah.
But is the like, if you're facing that situation of like dashed audience hopes, or you don't get the reception you want, and you can come back to say, well, why do if you can say, well, we made the music we wanted to, we presented it the way that we wanted to, we listened to our own things, it was satisfying, it seemed to answer the call, and this is what it resulted in, so be it, right?
Yeah.
But if you actually have to be, at the end of the day, honest with yourself that you were really motivated by and trying to play a part that didn't seem to really resonate with yourself, that's got to sting a lot more, right? Like, I made a fucking fool out of myself, and for what? So I could say goodbye to 2 people at the end of the night, right? Like, it's just, you don't have any, to some degree, you don't have any control over how the world chooses to receive you, right? Like, so be honest and true enough with yourself so that if it doesn't turn out the way that you want it to, at least you're not sitting around and kicking yourself for putting on the wrong hat again, as we said before.
The 3-cornered hat turns out not a good look.
Yeah.
Well, no, and that's something where, again, if you find your own benchmarks of success within the creativity and the output of doing the thing, you'll always be a success.
Sure. Yeah, exactly.
Yeah. And then if you consider everything, hey, someone else gets something out of it, great.
Exactly. Yep.
That's awesome. It's not intrinsic to what I need out of doing this, but that's lovely.
It's great. Yes. Yeah.
That's
entirely preferable. Like,
sure.
It's so much nicer to like play a show to a lot of people than it is to be like play a shitty show to an empty club. Like,
if those are the choices, I'll take the full crowd, please.
Exactly.
That sounds great. But it's something where it's also, there's a give and a take to it. Just as there is, in the zeitgeist and people able to foster community. I mentioned there just being like this weird time period where, like whatever style of music Austerity Program does, it's was not like quote unquote in vogue. Is it in vogue now? No, but there's a community of people that all talk with each other regularly about the kind of stuff that they like.
Sure.
Which is not a thing that you had before in such quantities, because that's the good side of this constant connection to everyone. Now, if you want the bad sides, that's a whole nother podcast. It'll be a couple hours. But that said, it is a wonderful thing. It should never be short sold. I think this record rules.
Thank you.
I think all your records rule, but I think that this one has actually led the context for the first one to be even better as well. And I like them as a match set. I look forward to buying a copy so I can actually have a match set.
Excellent.
And I find the process of doing this and the specific approach to it to be so uniquely you guys, and I love it.
Great.
And I love you guys doing it for that. And again, see all the disclaimers earlier on in the episode. Everybody that's ready to get mad about something. No, it's a good example of how to do something that approaches salaciousness and do nothing salacious with it in any way, shape, or form. And if you like blistering BPMs and desperate situations, it's the record for you.
Yeah, and most people don't.
Most people.
Again, not recommended if you like.
Right, exactly. But if you want some retribution, some damnation, some divine intervention of the most jerk variety, boy, have I got a product for you. Justin's been great, man. It's so great having you back on. I can't believe it's been as long as it's been, but we definitely made up for lost time on it. Looking forward to getting a copy of the record. If I have the chance to see you again, I never miss an opportunity unless I'm held at gunpoint. We'll see.
Conan, I mean, definitely, thank you for the conversation. This has been really enjoyable. Obviously, thanks to anyone who chooses to listen in. And would also just say, wanting to recognize the length of the podcast that you've done, and the these clear places that you carve out, both with Caterwaul, with the band, with the podcast. I have immense amount of respect for it and real appreciation, and just gratitude that I can come on and be a part of it from time to time.
You're welcome anytime. It doesn't have to be in 5-year increments. Last question.
Yep.
Only question ever ask.
Okay.
So why do you do what you do?
Why do I do what I do? Mm-hmm. Because to the extent that I have some freedom and agency to sort of over certain parts of my life, and I can think of how do I want to spend it. This is the thing that I find the most rewarding. I just be participating in the community, listening to music, all that stuff is fantastic, but actually getting to the point of being able to take the time to create something. There's lots of spaces in my life that that's not really where it can take me and drive me. But when I can just take myself out of everything else that I have to do and just be like, okay, what do I want to do with the things that the time and the energy and attention that I have that strictly to indulge my own self, this is the thing that I just enjoy more than anything else.
Justin Foley, thank you so much, man. Appreciate you.
Right. Thanks.
Take care. There he goes, Mr. Justin Foley. Let's hear one of these Bible songs that everyone's talking about here. We're gonna hear, what are we gonna hear? Let's hear Lamentations. I like saying the word lamentation. Such a great word. Lamentations 4:11. Here we go.
You could be a king's son, sweeter than pastry, moving like Travolta through a disco, whipping your curls. That don't mean a thing to me, boy. Might as well be piss in the sea, boy. For all I know. I work with my hands, rising with the dawn. Make what I need and I'm done. Home to the family, dinner could take your children, cook them in oil. You could be a witch girl with your cauldron out on the street. That don't mean a thing to me, girl. How you pluck your fruit from the tree, girl. When hunger comes around, I mind my business, going through the world, eyes to my feet till I'm home. Shut in with the family, bolts on the door, windows blacked out so I never see anything out on the streets. There are things I won't talk about, streetlights as gallows and crows that are beating, and how can the night be so long? Christ, it hurts to remember what my life was before. Pigs in town don't take time to ask twice when it's face down, hands back, eyes shut, mouth silent. You can take the floor if you're still alive when you see the sun go down.
There you go. Little Lamentations for you. Little Lamentations for you, buddy. Coming at you. So that's Bible Songs 2, which you can purchase from Control Burn Records. You get austerityprogram.bandcamp.com. Get the bundle there or at, controlburnrecords.com as well. It's a good place for it. I'd like to thank Justin Foley for being on the show yet again. Love those guys. Can't wait to see him wherever that might be coming up. Get that record. Name of this show is Conan Neutron's Protonic Reversal. Thank you so very much for listening to it. You can find the shows Thursdays, 8 Eastern, 7 Central, 6 Mountain, 5 Pacific, streaming live on YouTube, podcasted later, everywhere, always free, no ads, no sponsors, no kidding. ProtonicVersal.com. Anywhere you find your better podcasts. But if you want to support the show and get episodes sooner, $1 a month at patreon.com/Protonic Reversal is where you would do that. Help keep the lights on around here.
Signing off.
It's much appreciated.
Mr. and Mrs. America, and all the ships at sea.
Early access is what that gets you. Early access. Some good stuff coming up too. So stay tuned for all that. Thanks for folks sharing the episodes around, liking, subscribing to your platform of choice, leaving a review, silly as that might seem. Helps people discover the show, and it beats back the almighty algorithmic overlords. So deeply appreciated. Next week coming up, Nina Nastasia returns. new Jolie Lade record. Very excited to talk to Nina. Great artist.
Microphone turns sound into electricity.
I think there's going to be 2 others before I go back on tour, so stay tuned. Oh yeah, and Japan tour breakdown. Stay safe out there.
On Route 128, the dark and lonely.
Check you later.
I got my radio on. Can you hear me now? 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 The end of radio. And that snare drum and that drum roll means we've got a winner. If you're the 5th caller, or any caller at all, welcome to my top 10. I'd like to thank our sponsor. But we haven't got a sponsor. Not if you were the last man on earth. She was prepared to prove it. This one goes out to a special girl. There is no special girl. It's the end of radio. The last announcer plays the last record. The last what? Leaves the transmitter. Circles the globe in search of a listener. Can you hear me now? Can you hear me now? Can you hear me now? Is it really broadcasting if there's no one there to receive? It's the end of radio. As we come to the close of our broadcast day, got my radio on. Can you hear me now? This is a test! If this had been a real emergency, hey! This is a real goddamn emergency!